Welcome back, everybody, to the OnlyFantasy NBA podcast, your source for explicit and uncensored fantasy basketball content. We're back with another week. And look, if things feel a little bit tense among the panel here, that's because we're dealing with a fairly major fantasy event this week. Our AFL Keeper League, the website that has been the host of that for the last few years, has just come out a few weeks prior to the season and decided they're going to ditch it for good. Look, I know that this is not fantasy basketball related necessarily, but just imagine all of you people that play in default Yahoo leagues, that you got 2 weeks prior to the start of next season's fantasy season, and Yahoo came out with an announcement that they're deleting their entire fantasy platform for good. I mean, that would just be, it'd be nuts. You'd all be going crazy. So this is what we're dealing with at the moment. We're not happy. We're not a bunch of happy people.
You wouldn't want to be the commissioner of that kind of league.
You would not.
That's all I can say.
Lots of work on Shan's plate. All right, cool. On the pod this week, Shan's going to give us an injury update and news. Nick's going to give us his usual fantasy line of the week. We're going to give you some picks for the hot waiver wire pickups that we've identified, and we're going to cover off some possible trade targets and options for that stuff. And finally, we'll hand it over to the foremost Kawhi expert in the Southern Hemisphere for a Kawhi Leonard update to close us out. So, Shan, do you want to kick us off with injuries and news?
Yes, I'm a little unprepared today, so I'll do this off the cuff. Injuries. All right. So what do we got?
Is my entire team on there? It feels like it should be my entire team on there.
Well, most weeks it's been Howie, so maybe it's your turn.
I think it definitely is.
So the first big one as I go through teams alphabetically is KD, knee injury, saying about another 9 games. So whether that turns out into another week or two, is anyone benefiting from his absence at the moment?
Kyrie.
Hard to say. Yeah. The team's just losing now, so
rather than
off winning. And on. So Simmons has done fuck all. So who knows?
Yeah. Although they
Kyrie's eating up, so Kyrie owners might be okay with that.
Yeah, that's probably it. And then we move to Boston, and we've got Marcus Smart. He's out. I'm seeing, maybe another week, but I imagine it's very much in flux. He's a real tough son of a bitch and could turn up any day, is my guess. Anyone got a specific update?
That looked like a bad injury to me. I was watching that game. Looked like he'd wrenched his knee. And then he's like, I'm fine. And then they've gone, we're going to shut him down for 1 to 2 weeks. I just don't see what rush there is for Boston to bring him back.
I think that's the main thing.
Not at all.
Yep.
They might not be in a rush, but, Marcus Smart will probably push to get back as soon as possible.
Yeah, he's that kind of guy, for sure.
He seems one of the more competitive players in the league in terms of pushing himself and his own motivator. So,
when it happened, I've seen someone glance a finger and miss a month, just walking around in a sling and shit for months and stuff. Marcus Smart does what I thought might have been a serious knee injury, and he's walking around after the game going, I'm fine. I'm fine, everyone. It's like NBA players get played so much. I think the motivation to get on the court is slim sometimes.
Yeah.
Moving on,
refreshing
we got Dallas.
To see someone.
We got Dallas, and we got a player on your team, Nick, who's out for another couple of games, and that's Christian Wood. In his absence, no one's really dominated. I believe Dwight Powell had a huge game the other day, but there's no one who's really benefited much from that, and he'll be back soon.
That's a tough loss, Nick. But
I think
Woody's been really good this last few weeks.
I think he'll be back in he could be back come the weekend from what I've been hearing. So for my sake and for his sake, I hope that's true.
It was actually the injury I saw that I announced on the thread, and he came back on the court, but then he was hurt. He looked hurt. They went to a break. They dragged him off the court. They come back from the break, and he's on the court going, all right, let's go. And it's like, whoa, we could barely walk before. So I figured it was bad.
With the Rockets, we've got Kevin Porter Jr. out. Not the world's biggest fantasy loss, but an interesting thing I've noticed since he's gone down is Şengün is absolutely going bananas. So instead of Kevin Porter Jr. dribbling the air out of the ball along with Jalen Green, Şengün's doing really well. So it'll be interesting to see when he comes back in a game or two, whether that goes back to Şengün sort of just being a bit average.
Yeah.
Halliburton, Dave, he should be back pretty soon. Another couple of games out, maybe. I saw something come up on Twitter yesterday.
Yep. So there's those of you that have got TJ McConnell in your lineup, keep riding him. I've got him on my waiver wire pickups, but we'll get to him in a bit, I guess.
Perhaps the biggest fantasy news relates to Howie. You got AD back this week. Back today.
He's on the court.
The game right now. Yep.
It's going well.
Yep. I heard a minutes limit today, but that would probably be a one-off thing, and then he'll be right back into it, is my guess. Of course,
blocks as a factor. You got to get him on the court, I reckon, which I've done, and he has 2 blocks early in the second quarter.
Yep. And then we've got Memphis Grizzlies. Steven Adams is out for a number of weeks.
Yes, there'll be a waiver wire news on that later on.
There will be. You'll probably want to jump onto Brandon Clark, is my guess, and so I'm tipping my hat to where Howie's going to go later. But in previous games, it was Xavier Tillman who'd been starting. But yeah, it looks like it's Brandon Clark today.
Yeah, he's got a first-class ticket, but he's as blue as a boy can be, Shan.
Moving right along.
It's pretty blue. All right, and then at Milwaukee, we got Bobby Portis went down with a bit of an injury, and he'll be out for until maybe early Feb sometime. I'm not sure who steps up really there. Maybe Brook Lopez plays a few more minutes. Karl Anthony Towns still out for bloody ever. All I'm seeing at the moment is he might not be back till late Feb, but
that was extended. So he said in an interview on a podcast, he said he was asked, "You're due to come back in about 2 weeks," and he said, "I don't want to give any of the fans false hope. It's going to be longer." Right. He's like, "I don't want anyone saying to me, you're not telling us the truth about your injury. I'm not going to be back in that time."
Okay, let me make a quick adjustment to my trades suggestions.
Are you serious?
I was telling people to think about trading away Anthony Edwards because he's been on a heater and Cat's coming back, but Cat's not coming back.
All right, and then there was an update.
It was the look back, man. No one comes back quick from the look back.
You were right on that, I have to say. Yeah.
Speaking about you guys being right, you ripped into our league mate who took Zion Williamson off my hands. There was an update in regards Zion the other day. I think it was like he's going to be out for another 2 weeks. So we will see on that. Mitch Robinson at New York is out for until late Feb. No one's really stepping up there except maybe Julius Randle sucking up even more usage than he ever usually does, which is usually a lot. Moving on, go to Phoenix. Devin Booker. I heard some good news about Devin Booker. It wasn't fantastic, but there was something good came out.
Not really. So we were always thinking sort of next week, and that was confirmed in a way by Monty Williams, but he basically said, look, he's got a bunch of hoops still to jump through before he gets back on the court. So it was kind of like cautionary, I suppose. Yeah.
Yep. And Cam Johnson has returned for Phoenix, and he's been doing really well.
Had a good game.
Yeah. Yeah. Keep going through the Spurs. Devin Vassell is still out for who knows long, until the end of February maybe. So if you've got him, that sucks. No one's super stepping up in his absence. Maybe Jeremy Sochan. Do we know how to pronounce Sochan? Anyway,
haven't bothered.
I'll go with that, Chen.
He's borderline fantasy relevant, but I think one day he'll be a player. And lastly, my man, Kristaps Porzingis. Hard to say.
What's happened?
Yeah, all of you guys warned me. You said I hinged my fantasy season on Porzingis and Zion, and I was told. So I'm not surprised, but he'll be out until maybe another week, maybe another 2 weeks. And in his absence, there's been some interesting, actually, fantasy relevance on the Wizards. I've jumped on board a couple of them. I don't expect them all to work out, but we've got Dan Gafford, he's back up. We've got the guy they traded away, Rui Hachimura, to free up minutes for, and that's Dave's boy,
Avdija.
Danny Avdija. Yep. So he's doing really well as well. And that's all our injuries at the moment.
Nice. I haven't got anything else on news, so let's move on to Fantasy Line of the Week. Nico, what do you got for us?
All right, so Fantasy Line of the Year, I didn't change that. That's Line of the Week, so this will actually encapsulate games played from the 12th through to today, the 26th.
Are you suggesting
obviously not including today.
Jokic is dominating Line of the Year? It's possibly true.
Yeah.
I'm kind of just showing that, look, from over that period from the 12th to the 26th, there's been no editing. Those are his actual games that he's played.
Insane.
So
wow.
It's not the highlight package. It's not the best games. That's what he's played over the last 2 weeks. So the dude's been unbelievably great. So 13 of 14. The one that I've actually circled there is the one that I'm going to say is the best one of that. So 13 of 14 from the field. That's freaking awesome.
It's
He
the
got a
field goal
3. He got
percentage,
9
isn't
of 10.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's phenomenal. You haven't seen that kind of consistent field goal percentage. Well, I can't really recall that ever happening. So
not from a guy that shoots
pretty
that many
happy with.
shots as well. Anyway, yeah, absolutely.
He's number one over the past 2 weeks.
Insane.
Yeah, and I'd expect him to end up now. AD's back. He might have something to say about challenging for the number 1 position come the end of the year if he can kind of get his body right. But apart from that, I can't see anyone else getting anywhere near Jokic.
Well, over the past 2
Anthony
weeks,
Edwards.
the only guy who's challenging him over the past 2 weeks is Damian Lillard, who's smoking a fat sack. Yeah. Even in the game currently, right now, he's, wouldn't surprise me if he reaches 50.
Wow.
Yeah, Lillard's been great. He hasn't had that beast mode game, but all of his games are really, really good.
Thing about Lillard, though, and we must remember these are always stat-based measures for the ranks. The reason why AD ranks so high, doesn't play as well as Jokic, I don't think, but AD low turnovers, steals and blocks, good free throw this year. Lillard, I think, had 5 of 20 against the Lakers, and Pat Bev was giving him shit about Dame time. He was looking at his watch going, it's not working. I think it'll just be difficult for Lillard to consistently rank high because he's always going to have those games because he's a shooting point guard.
Sure, he has been shooting 50% over the past 2 weeks. So, yeah, you're right. He's on a hitter.
With the other two near misses for line of the week, Ant-Man and LeBron, look, take your pick between these two games. They're both sensational. 8 threes versus 9 threes. They're both shooting mid to high 50s from the field, 100% from the line. Get a handful of rebounds and assists. LeBron's got the edge on him in rebounds and assists, and turnovers, none. Those defensive stats are pretty good from Ant-Man. 3 steals, 3 blocks. Both of them made mid-40s. They could easily be line of the week. I think that this week's probably the week where there's not 10 out of 10 games in terms of individual games. There's some really good games. So there's a lot of guys that kind of came really close, including these two guys.
Just before we do that, can I take us back to a podcast about a month ago, a little more than a month ago, when Anthony Davis went down, and Shan told us that LeBron was going to step up in AD's absence, play ridiculous minutes, post ridiculous stats, and potentially burn himself out and cost himself towards the end of the season, perhaps having to take a few more breaks, a few more rest days, and to prepare himself for the playoffs, or even potentially get injured due to his older body. So I guess we're going to see now, aren't we? AD's back, so maybe LeBron can take the foot off the gas a little.
Yep. And according to the rhetoric coming out of LA newspapers, the intention is to use Hachimura a lot.
Interesting.
They plan for him to start and be part of the future. So I'm thinking Hachimura is going to take 10 to 14 shots a game. So I think there'll now be attempts to lighten some of that load. That's my feeling.
So on that, the other shoe has yet to drop, and maybe it won't, but if I was the LeBron owner, he's ranked 4 for the season right now. I'd be trading him for not anyone, but if I could get a top 10 guy straight away, I would do it.
So look, I usually have honourable mentions in this, but I thought I'd say honourable mentions / I'm not done yet, because we did write these guys off, so to speak, a little bit. Dave touched on Kyrie Irving kind of in our last podcast that we had, but have a look at their performances over the last 2 weeks since the previous podcast. Again, nothing's been edited out. They're every game. It's not just the good games there. So these guys have really turned it around. Probably would have been a good time to get Kawhi probably 2.5, 3 weeks ago, because he looks to have turned it around. And what's he averaging? About 37 minutes a game there over that last couple of weeks.
It's a bit much.
He needs some rest, maybe.
Yeah, I'm not entirely comfortable about that minute count there for Kawhi. Jeez.
They are big minutes for a guy that hasn't played big minutes in 4 years.
Yeah, true.
I reckon he's been listening to you, Howie.
Actually, I think it's the right thing. What are you waiting? What are you saving Kawhi for?
Yeah.
I think it's the right move.
Yep. If the Clippers are going to win a title, it's probably this year.
Obviously, Kyrie too has had some pretty big games. I'm not so wrapped with those games on January 13, 16 of 20, his field goal percentage. But when he finally got it together, you see the points go up, the field goal percentage go up, and his games look really, really good. So it kind of shows that he's always been operating at that level. But once he gets that field goal percentage right, he's phenomenal. So yeah, all the best for him too.
Similar to LeBron, though, you saw this coming with Kyrie in terms of KD went down. It was going to be plain as day. Kyrie's going to go off here. So it's just what those elite guys do. If their secondary star or the other star on the team goes down, it's their time to feed.
So one of the members of the panel has to head off a little early today, so we're going to chunk through it a little bit faster than we normally would do. Let's get on to the waiver wire pickups. Anybody want to kick us off? I'll throw a name out there because we've already spoken about him. TJ McConnell, still only 63% rostered, ranked 20 over the last 14 days, which is incredible. Look, get that guy off the waiver wire. You still get a couple of games out of him before Tyrese Halliburton gets back, and he's going to get you what you need.
Yep. Good pickup by Kerem. You can ride that stat train until it ends, which will be in about 3 or 4 games. But just a smart pickup.
Yeah. Who's got one for us?
I got one for you.
How about that?
What, Nick? You want to go?
Powell.
Norm Powell, yeah.
I think he's still available on our wire,
Norm
isn't he?
He is, and he's been great. Look, be very happy with Norm Powell. He shoots a shitload of threes, gets a lot of points. He hasn't been turning the ball over a lot either. Doesn't get you many defensive stats, but look, I think he's a pretty reliable source of stats. So yeah, he'd be my number one pick from our pool of free agents.
Yeah.
I had a good look at him last night actually, and decided against him. And my reasonings were twofold. One of the reasons is that Luke Kennard's about to return, and I think they battle each other for minutes. I think usage and minutes are affected by Luke Kennard. The other thing about a Powell is that his bad games are bad. They're deceptively bad. So when he has a game like he did a few games ago, he had 16 points, maybe 3 rebounds, 2 turnovers, nothing else. That's a stinker.
Yeah, true.
And I think any serious fantasy player needs to be wary. Of course, if he gets 30, that's great. If he's not scoring 24 points, I think he's a borderline ownable, and he's averaging about 8. Oh, he's averaging about 22 over the stretch last 6 games. So he's definitely going well. I think Kennard returning, along with the fact that he needs 20 points to be good, I think he's a problematic ad. I had a good look at him last night.
Yeah, the one thing I noticed is that his threes are actually a little bit lower than I was expecting, and maybe that's just a recent trend, and it'll bounce back. But I think he was less than 1-3 a game from what I was seeing. So,
really?
Yeah.
That low?
No way.
0.9, I think.
His last games in threes, he's got 4, then 2, then 4, then 7, then 3, then 2, then 3, then 3.
I must be wrong. I have to be wrong, surely.
Yeah, so just my quick math says that's higher than 0.9 threes per game. But maybe I'm wrong. I haven't got a calculator.
Hey, are you a mathematician? No, you're not. Moving on.
Where's the stat, man?
Shen, what do you got for us?
Yeah, I got a bunch of flyers. I would have a look at Rui Hachimura. He's not a great fantasy guy, but he will get some points. So he might be borderline. Let's see if he comes in hot. And then the 2 guys I picked up, DeLon Wright and Denny Avdia. DeLon Wright's, if he can handle lack of points, he's close to leading the league in steals. He'll probably rank well. So it depends whether the team fits you. He'd be a good ad. And Denny Avdia is an interesting one. They traded away Rui Hachimura, they say, to get Denny more involved. And the first 2 games, he's got at least 10 boards in both and has looked good. He hasn't started. So we will see. One more, Jeremy Sochan. I've had my eyes on for a couple of months. It wouldn't surprise me if he has a hot month. And then the last thing I'll throw out there is this is the time of year with your free agency pickups to consider the trade deadline. So is there anyone, and then there's always a risky move, but is there anyone out there who you consider might be either getting traded or if someone is likely to get traded, like a Miles Turner, who's their backup?
Yeah. I might get us to do a little bit of research on some specifics to relating to the trade deadline for next week's pod, but good stuff. Howie, you had some?
Yep, I had one. Brandon Clark. I saw today that the first game with Adams out, Clark didn't start, played 14 minutes, and I was like, damn, what's that about? Because Brandon Clark was borderline ownable, playing 20 minutes off the bench anyway. So I actually picked him up for today, seeing that he was starting at centre. Put him on the court. He's had a really good first half, and I think he's just part of their system when he's on the court. And if he's going to get this sort of 27-plus minutes per game, which looks like he will if he continues to start, that's a top 80 potential player while Adams is out. That's my recommendation, assuming you need the things he does. He's very clean, very efficient. You need a lot of assists or a lot of boards or something. Yep. You maybe look elsewhere.
I got a few more for us. This guy's a little bit speculative. Isaiah Joe, that's a little bit deep, a little bit of a deep cut. But we've been talking about this type of guy all season for free agents. Doesn't hurt you anywhere. Good percentages, certainly at the moment over the last few weeks. Good percentages. Very low turnover.
He had a couple of good ones.
Yeah, and
then he went cold, unfortunately.
Not exactly a dynamic stat getter, but threes and points and some steals. And he's producing at the moment when OKC don't have a lot of injuries, so that says good things about his role on the team, I think. So that should be sustainable, I think. Only 6% rostered, so he's basically available in every public league.
Nico picked him up in our league about a week ago, but then dropped him, I think.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I picked him up and got the back game, but then he was shit, so he's out now. Sorry, Joe.
All good. Caruso, beastly stocks numbers, super low roster percentage. Look, he's just one of those guys that if those are some cats, and this is particularly relevant as we get towards the end of the season, you might be specifically targeting certain categories that you can pick up a few points here. And grabbing somebody like Caruso for steals and a few blocks from the point guard position, that may be the difference between you winning the league or not.
I also think he's about 4.1 assists as well, so he's actually got something. He's got some sneaky value.
Yep. Onyeka Okongwu, top 50 over the last 30 days. Seems to have found his consistency, great block numbers, only likely to improve with a potential John Collins trade, which has been in the works for years now, but I think is likely this time around. I think it's far more likely this year that Collins gets moved before the trade deadline.
Only problem with that is his stats have been really great over the last few weeks because Capella has missed most of that. Mm-hmm. And Capella's back now. So if they do get rid of... He's not going up from what he's been doing over the last few weeks, but the last few weeks have been pretty awesome.
But I reckon he might get shunted into the starting lineup alongside Capella if Collins gets traded out. I think there's a possibility of that.
There's also a narrative in Atlanta newspapers that Capella would increasingly take a backward seat. But as is often the case, it's probably happened less than anyone thought it would. Capella's down to 26, 27 minutes, but until it's 24, which can ruin both players' value.
Yeah, true.
It always happens at a slower pace than I think the media in the city claims.
I think Okongwu's still been less than 30 minutes a game, even with Capella out, though. So he can produce stats in low minutes. He's one of those guys. And then finally, I've got J-Dub, Jalen Williams, OKC, only 51% rostered. Look, I lost the game of chicken with Shan on J-Dub. I was holding off and waiting for him to sort of start showing a little bit more, but Shan jumped before. So... Well done, Shan. He's going to be a star in future seasons. He won't be a star this year, but he's just going to be really solid for the rest of the year.
Hang on a minute. I take issue with that. Let me just tell you Jalen Williams' rankings, and you tell me whether he's a star. Come on, internet. Okay. 53 over the last 2 weeks, 32 over the last month, 102 over the last 2 months. So
he's coming good. I hear what you're saying. All right, boys, moving on. Any last ones and in waiver wire pickups before we move on to the next?
Kyle Anderson. I watched him in the Minnesota game today. I was watching Ant-Man play, and I was quietly impressed. He had 2 blocks, 2 steals, which is handy for one of these kind of 40 kind of guys. He had a triple-double on January 17th, and in that same game, he also had a block, a steal, and a 3-pointer. And 0 turnovers in that same game. So he has the potential to be really fantasy friendly. I just don't know whether I'm fully committed to believing that he can do well in Minnesota unless there is trades.
He reminds me of who was that guy who played in the title winning teams for the Heat? He was drafted by Memphis and he was just a classic glue guy.
Jeez.
Battier.
Shane Battier. He reminds me a little bit of Shane Battier, you kind of have to play him every single game because he's going to have these games where he just picks up blocks, steals and threes, and all of a sudden he provides a ton of his value. And if you have him sitting on the bench during that game, you've lost out.
Yeah.
So he's a tough one to own. But
what was interesting to me, I've been sweating on Naz Reid for years just to get his opportunity. But every time he gets his opportunity, he does fuck all with it. He plays better off the bench covering for people.
Mm-hmm.
And so Canderson outplaying Naz Reid is extraordinary. I think I'm officially off the Naz Reid bandwagon now.
Ditch Naz.
Getting those opportunities doesn't mean shit. He'll just have his 24 minutes and sometimes he'll have a big game in those minutes, but that's it.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, let's move on to the trades. Anybody got some interesting perspective trades for our multitude of listeners out there?
Oh, trades they should consider.
Trade targets they should consider. Do you want me to
I've
throw
got a
one out?
couple if you'd...
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, first one's Josh Giddey and the second one's Bam Adebayo.
Mm-hmm.
I can kind of see the writing on the wall with these guys. They look like they've taken the step from being, a little bit up and down to actually being consistently good. If you can get a manager who has a moment of weakness where they're still kind of not seeing them in the same light as what they're actually performing at, that'd be a really handy trade to get either of these guys, particularly Giddey. I mean, I think Adebayo, out of the two, he's probably the more established fantasy guy, and people are going to put more love on his name rather than Giddey. Yeah, you might get a few of us Aussies that are kind of fans, but I reckon if you can get Giddey now, it might be a really good time. Block your ears for a sec, Dave. If Shai gets shut down, could be the Giddey show too. So there's always that. Yeah, I'll be really interested to see how they go in the back half of the year compared to the first half of the year, because I reckon it'll be a pretty big improvement on both of them.
I like that paradigm as a trade target, Nick, the guy who's just stepping up and moving to another level during the course of a season for whatever reason. Might be other players on his team dropping off a little bit. It may be, in Giddey's case, his game coming together as a young player who's just developing. But I think that's the kind of guy
he's cutting down those reckless turnovers too, Dave. So I've watched a few of the games over the year, and I've seen a few where I'm like, oh, dude, he's so good, but he actually is quite reckless with the ball, and that's what allows him to be the player that he is. But he seems to have tightened that up a little bit. Still does get high turnovers, but not as high as they were trending earlier.
Finding the
I got to say, I disagree with that assessment.
Mm-hmm.
Keeping in mind that this is a 9-cat fantasy show. His last 5 games, just some pop math, 0.4 threes, 0.8 steals, 0.6 blocks, and he's still rocking almost 3 turnovers. That's fantasy problem, in my view. If you've tanked a couple of those categories, so be it. He could be a really valuable element. I don't think that ranks in the top 100.
No, it doesn't. But I think that's also potentially lending itself towards
a good target.
Making him a reasonable target. Like, I think if you see something in there, like up until this recent grouping, he was, to my memory, and I'd have to go back and look at his stats, but I think he was hitting a lot more threes. My memory is that his 3-point percentage had gone up over 40% for an extended period, and he was hitting a higher volume. So
it's halved over the last month. He's averaged 1. Over the last 2 weeks, it's dropped to 0.6. And then 0.3 over the last week. So he's in a cold funk.
So do you think he has that in him to stretch that a little, I guess, is the question.
Well, Howie was right that he's not been inside the top 100 in the last week or last 4 games or whatever it's been. But over the last 2 months, he's 58. Last month, 57. So it's not that he's fantasy unusable. He's just not a fantasy star.
Yeah.
I think the timing's probably about there. Like if someone were to approach you as a manager owning him with all that, I think it's probably a good time to get him, and you may end up getting rewarded for it on the back end of the season is what I'm kind of presuming is the likely outcome from that.
I think also that remember we had that pod earlier in the season where we were talking about these teams that might be tanking, and we were talking about the prospective shutdown of Shea and how Giddey and Shea were kind of handcuffed to an extent. That they both produce significantly more higher usage, all that kind of stuff when the other one is out. So you could take a flyer with the expectation that Shea's going to get shut down, and then you may get paid off. Nice. Let me give you one. Gary Trent Jr. You might be able to get him for a significant discount if you're in a less competitive league where an owner isn't aware of what he's doing. He's been ranked top 10 over the last 30 days. which is incredible. And a large part of it may be to do with his sort of low turnover rate, but he's also averaging like 28 points a game or something during that span. He's just been nuts. So,
and Toronto's kind of problematic. They're having a philosophical crisis in Toronto, I'm pretty sure.
True.
And they're exploring other ways to run their team. And Trent and Scotty Barnes have really benefited from that. They're clearly looking at other ways to do things.
They may well trade Fred VanVleet or Pascal Siakam. Those are the names that have been on the trade block. So I think they will trade someone, and that could open up more opportunity. But he doesn't really need more opportunity. He's averaging 28 points per game over the last month.
Yeah.
So
I've probably got one as well. Chris Middleton, who I still think is a really good player. He's done nothing so far. He's labouring under injury, but this is the stage of the season where you maybe need to try something like trying to acquire a Chris Middleton in the belief that he might step up after All-Star break. Consider his team's playoff bound. They're going to be fighting for rank, for seed in the playoffs. And I got to say he'd be cheap at the moment, I think.
I think you're right.
And a smart manager would either go to get him or hold on to him,
yeah.
I think, if you currently have him. Be patient.
And a nice little tangent over to me there. I do currently have Chris Middleton, who I traded.
Are you a smart manager, though, Shan? That is the question.
No. Let's not say smart. Let's say lucky.
That's a prerequisite for what I'm saying.
Let's say lucky.
KOTD.
Middleton and Sengun for Trent about a few weeks ago.
Right.
And on Middleton, he's it's only his second game back today, and the first game he played like 12 minutes, and today he played 15 minutes and he scored a lot. So I feel like it's just the minutes at the moment. They're warming him up. So yeah, I think he'd be a good target if you could try to fleece a frustrated Middleton owner.
Look, I'm a little bit time conscious. Does anybody have a last one on trades before we shift into closing out gear? Good.
I'll chuck in, and I won't explain much. I'll just say I would be trying to get guys who are either injured, about to be traded, or maybe have just come back from injury. So I'm thinking I'd be going for Robert Williams at the moment, or Kristaps Porzingis.
Yep, good call. I like both those names. All right. Finally, the segment that we've all been waiting for with the foremost Kawhi Leonard expert in the Southern Hemisphere, Howie. What have you got for us this week?
Well, I've got to say, I'm happy with how the Clippers are handling this. He's playing huge minutes and he's playing some quality ball. That's their only option at this point. Their record's not so great, and they need to ride him as hard as they can now. There is no tomorrow if you're the Clippers. So I see this next 6, 8, 10 weeks as the key weeks of this part of Kawhi's career. I've been a firm believer over the journey that Kawhi has been a very satisfied basketballer. I feel like he came to the Clippers, he'd won his championships, and he was just like, whatever happens now is neither here nor there. And I unfortunately for the Clippers, that's been the way. You might as well use him. So I'd commend the Clippers on how they've run him for the last 2 or 3 weeks, and that has to continue. If he gets injured, well, I don't think low minutes is going to prevent his injury anyway. Might as well play him a lot. And for fantasy owners, enjoy the run, because it's been a tough year if you've drafted Kawhi Leonard. It's all very well that he's playing well now. You're in the wilderness with him for 3 months, and now you're in a position where you have to go as hard as you can in the final months to see if you can make up the ground that he helped you lose.
That's interesting.
Having said that, in my public league, he was actually dropped. And in the public league, they have a bidding system. And when he was dropped many months ago, I actually went to myself as the Southern Hemisphere's foremost Kawhi Leonard expert. I said to myself, I'm going to bid everything to get him. I did a very big bid, $55, I think, and I got him. And it's actually really paying off for me right now.
Yeah,
I'm second in my public league, and I just smashed the top team, so I'm looking good.
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, look, it's interesting that there's a fella in our league, Kerem, who took both Kawhi and Kyrie and in our draft, and they were speculative, risky picks, and they may well end up paying off for him in this second half of the year. Let's see if he starts flying back up the ranks.
I think he might.
Just between us. Everything that's come before doesn't really matter in a way.
Yeah.
If you're in shooting distance, even remotely within shooting distance, and have games in hand, now's the time.
Yeah,
you can still come back.
Yeah, absolutely. And our league this year is so close.
Tight. Real tight.
Real tight. All right, guys, that's awesome. Anything else before we sign off?
One thing. I remember I said Dame Lillard might hit 50 today.
What's he got?
50 and 9 threes.
God damn it, Dame.
Ooh.
And 8 assists and 6 boards.
That's some good stuff.
18 of 24. This will be the line of the week next week.
That's some fantasy.
You'll have to remind me this time next week, Shan, just because,
That's fantasy.
It'll get lost in amongst all these other good games.
2 steals, 2
AD's
turnovers.
had a pretty good first half in his return game as well, in limited minutes also. So good luck to AD in the second half of that Lakers game.
All right, guys, let's sign off. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Do the usual thing and leave us a comment, like, subscribe, all of that sort of stuff. And we'll see you next week. Bye.